Hello and welcome to Magna Code. Today I'll be creating a tutorial on how to create a zombie shooter game. So first you should open up your script.js file and you need to set up a canvas for you to draw on. So you need to create var canvas, and the var part is what you use to declare a variable, and after that you need to type in document.get element by ID. And right now we don't know the ID of our canvas, and the canvas sadly does not exist yet. So we have to open up our index.html file and type it in, canvas, which is an element in HTML, and we have to close it off with a canvas tag, and all elements have certain attributes. So canvas has an ID attribute, so we can set the ID to canvas. Next, we can go back into the script.js file and type in canvas. Now we have the canvas file. Now we need to create another variable called ctx, and we have to use canvas.get context, and you have to get the context 2D because we don't want to use 3D. So next we have to, let's try it out. So ctx.fill rect. So this is creating a rectangle with 0, 0 as the x and y position of the rectangle, and 100 by 100 as the width and height. So if you run this, yay, now we have a square. But as you can see, there's this tiny margin right up top here. So we really don't want that. So we can change that in the style.css. So here we can type in body and then margin. Then we can set the margin to 0px on every single side using the 0px. So 0px stands for 0 pixels. So if we run this again, there is no margin. Now, as you can see, say we want to create a 400 by 400 pixel square and run it. Wait, but this doesn't look like a square, does it? So, Canvas already has some predefined width and height already set. So we have to change that so that it fills up the entire screen. So in our script.js file, we can type in ctx.canvas.width equals, and we want to set the width of this to the entire width that is given. So we have to do window.inner width. Now we can't just do this for one side. We have to do this for both. So ctx.canvas.height equals window dot dot inner height. Now if we run this, hooray, we have a 400 pixel by 400 pixel square. Now, you see these very annoying scroll bars? Well, we don't want that. So we can go into our style.css and we can write overflow is hidden. So basically what overflow hidden does is it completely removes all of the pixels that are outside of what is seen. So after doing that, you can't have any scroll bars. So next, now we don't want a square for a zombie shooter, do we? We want a circle. So we can delete this, and we can do ctx dot begin path, which essentially creates a path. And so then we can use ctx.arc. ctx.arc basically creates a circle, and so we can do ctx.fill. because we want to fill this circle in and not just make the outline. Now if we run this, ta-da, it's a circle. But we want our player, which is the circle, to be able to move around. So we want to create a player object. So basically a player object. An object is something that stores multiple values, say x to be 0 and y to be also 0. So this is an object. Now, to access a player's object, to access any object's values, you have to type in player, which is the name of the variable, dot, and x. Next, we can do player dot y for the y, and then once we run it, it creates a circle at 0, 0, but it's only showing a fourth of it. But we want it to show the whole thing. So let's create another value here, which is the radius. So the radius, we can make this to be 50. So now, for rendering it, we can add the player dot radius. Oh, now I can copy this and paste it right on the y's as well. And after it runs, which is sometimes running on Replit takes some time, after it's finished, ta-da, it runs at exactly the right place. So the 50 here stands for the radius of the circle. So we can change this player.radius. And 2 times map.pi, this is if it should fill in the whole circle, or a fourth of the circle, for instance, or just half of the circle. So next, we can make this something called a function. So making this a function makes it much easier to use, so we can create a circle at whenever we want. Oops. Now tab this, and we can create function, and we can create the name of this function to be draw player, and keep closing flower brackets after and beginning of the code. So now we can run it. It doesn't do anything because we've never called this function. So let's we can call draw player and a semicolon at the end, which is very important. Run it, and ta-da! It does the same exact thing as before, but now we can call this function much easier. So in every single video game out there, there's some things called game loops. So it's basically code that's run again and again every second when you play a game. So we have to create something that's like that. So we can create a function called draw. Then in here, we want to draw the player. And we can delete this over here. Now, if we call the draw function, it's only going to run this code once. We want to call this every single millisecond. So you can do set interval. You can input the draw function, and then you can do 1000 divided by 60. It might look cryptic, but in the end it's pretty simple. So set interval is a function where you pass in a function that you want to call every single certain amount of milliseconds, and 1000 by 60 represents how many pixels are between calling the function once and next. So it's basically going to call the draw function 1000 divided by every 1000 divided by 60 milliseconds. And have you ever heard of a video game having, like, boasting 60 FPS? Well, that stands for 60 frames per second. So 60 frames per second means that it's going to call the game loop function 60 times every second. So 1000 is the number of milliseconds per 1 second. Now you want to divide this by 60 because you want 60 FPS, And if you run this, it doesn't seem like it's doing much, but it's repeatedly drawing this circle over and over again. Now, in player, we can add another part of this. So, right now, we want our player to be able to move. So, to the document, you can add an event listener, which is pretty self-explanatory, and you can make it call a certain function every so often. No, a certain function after some event occurs. So let's make this event called key down. So this is an event where every single time a key is down, meaning you've pressed on the key, it's going to call this function. And this function has to contain something called an event. And so with the event, you have to detect for a key press, say the D key. So you can do if e.key base equals. So equals is representing if two values equal each other. So I can, in the quotation marks, I can keep in the D key. And remember, we don't want to make this capital, or we'd have to click on the Shift key and the D key to move. So now we want to make the players .x. We want to keep on increasing it by, say, 5. So that means that it's going to move 50 pixels every single time you it sees that you've pressed the D key. So let's try this out. Now when we press the D key, it's moving, but you see that you can't exactly see the circle over time. So what we need to do is clear the screen as soon as the next frame is rendered. So you have to do ctx.clear screen. No, not clear screen. Clear rect. Then we have to clear the entire screen, so we have to start at 0, 0. Then we have to move at window. Now we have to, the width has to be window.inner width and window.inner height. Now if we format this and then run it, ta-da! Our character is moving. Now if you see, our controls are a bit glitchy, so we have to change it. So it only sees this key down movement every so often, so we wanted to do this so that our character movement is smooth. So we have to create a dx variable, which stands for directional x velocity. It might sound very complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. After creating a dx variable, we need to create a dy variable, set this also to equal to 0. Now, here we can set the dx to equal to 5. And now, we also need another one, document.add event listener, and we want to create an event whenever the key is up. So if you do comma space function, and this function has to take in an argument e. Now you can do if e.key equals d. Now you can change the player's directional x velocity to 0. Now we have one last step to do. We need to create an update function in the player. So doing this, we can get this update function. So now we can call a function every single time this draw function is called. So what we want this function to do is take this player's x, and we want it to add this .dx to it. Now we want to do the same thing for the y, so we can just copy this and paste, and we can change all of these values to y's. And after creating this, we can call it right before the draw player event, the draw player function. So we can do player dot, and we have to do update. Now we have to add the parentheses because it's a function, and if you run this and I click the D key, it moves, and it's moving much smoother than what was before. So now we need to add the same exact functionality to every single key and paste it. Now we want to change the directional x velocity to -5 if the key equals A. And then next we have to do the same exact thing for W and S. Now for W, we want to change the dy to -5. Then we want to change the dy when it's S to 5. Now we can copy this and paste it down here. Now we have to change all the dx's and dy's to 0, because we don't want to keep on moving even though our key is not pressed. Now we have the basics of movement for our zombie shooter game. Thank you for watching, and see you later next time.